All right, continuing on. We'll go back to that later. Uh, so I gave you the variable input, right? It's a number slider that changes um, as we see fit, right? So we can just slide it back and forth. It's not super exact unless we want it to be exact. But what I'm going to do is override that with static numerical input. And you'll see that it's kind of silly that I'm doing this, but I just want to show you that there are two different types. So with panel, right here under params, under the input panel, there's a component called panel. And this one comes through as like this giant yellow block. This one is a little bit different. What I kind of want to show you is that a panel can be used in two different ways. You can use it to manually input information and then feed it in to something, or you can use it to read information. So if I double click it like this and I type in 1, I can take that 1 and plug it into X, and you see that it moved over a value of 1. That's the simple form. But that panel, if I Control Z all the way back to its original place, can also read the information as well. So if I take the sphere output and I plug it into the panel, it now reads like this. It reads as, says 0 next to it. I'll explain that in a bit. But then it says untrimmed surface. So that's important because at certain points, you're going to want to be able to readily see the information that is being processed. The information also exists right here. So if I hover over the output, it tells me that information right here. But it's not just going to stay there unless I put a panel on it. Okay, so the reason that we have that is because this, for us, is a very versatile tool, and I'll use it a lot. So we'll get used to a couple of the different settings for it. But right now, we're just going to use it as a static number. And for me, what I like to do when I'm doing a static number is to just make it really small like this. You can make it different sizes, but I just pull it all the way up to make it really small like that, and I'll put in a number like 0. Hit enter. It should look like this, and if you plug it in, it won't change anything because the default value is 0 anyway. Now if I wanted to move it, I could change it to 10 and it'll move over. Just double click it to change the number. So it's going to look silly because I'm going to make all three of these a value of 0, but I'll show you the change later on. So anyway, if we want all three values to be the same thing, you can plug in using the same output. You can use the same input into 3 separate values. So this 0 can also be plugged into the Y and the Z. So then at the same time, I can change the X, Y, and Z all at the same time by going to this and changing it to, say, a 5, and then it moves over there. But, like I said, I'm going to go back to 0. So before I ask for questions, I think a number of you may have run into this issue where if you hit enter and hit OK, it'll give you an error. Yeah, a number of you saw that, didn't you? That's because this is the one instance where syntax, like programming syntax, like computer code, actually does matter. The reason is when you hit enter from 0 down to the other line, another line, it switches from reading a singular numerical data input to multi-line text. And when it reads as multi-line text, that 0 is no longer an integer 0, it's a string 0. When it reads as a string in computer programming language, it's not a number. It's just the alphanumeric representation of 0. That might be really confusing to you. I might have really thrown you off. But basically, think of numbers and text as two separate families. You can type out the number 0 using letters. So when you change a number 0 to a string, it's as if it's reading it with letters. Is that better? Okay. So you need to make sure that it is a single line numerical data input when you're doing this. And just don't hit enter and it won't give you the error. All right. So that's just the placement of the sphere. The other part is we need to set up a radius for the sphere. Okay, and that part's much easier now. You know how to do a static number. You know how to do a dynamic number. Dynamic meaning I can change it. So I'm going to input a number slider for the radius. Okay, but what I want to avoid is every time I need a number slider, because we need them a whole lot, I want to avoid having to place it in the workspace and then double click it and then double click the number and then change the number and then click the green arrow, the green check, and then hit OK every time I want to set what the parameters of that slider are going to be. So there's a shortcut that I must give to you right up front here today, and that's to double click in the workspace, and you can use the search feature that's there to shortcut to a number slider using syntax. So if I double click in the workspace, it says enter a search keyword. But if I type in something like slide or slider, right, you'll see that a whole bunch of these things show up, and you can select from those. That's a search feature. You can click the number slider and drop it in, and that's just going to give you the same thing that we had before. But then I still have to go through all that stuff and establish all the parameters for it. I don't want to do that. So I get rid of that. And instead of typing in slider, what I do is I actually just type in the values that I want for the slider. And it looks like this. So if I want my sphere to be anywhere from 1 radius to 10 radius, all I have to do is type in 1 is less than 10. Now, additionally, if I want it to go anywhere from 1 to 10, but I want to start my slider at 5, then I say 1 is less than 5 is less than 10. And you hit enter. So now you see my slider started at 5, and I can go back and forth all the way down to 1 and all the way up to 10. But what's different about this slider than when I selected this slider and I placed it in like that? What's different about those two, besides the numbers I gave it? Right. One of them is integers, one of them is real numbers. Okay. Or, yeah. So, anyway, if you want to use decimals, or if you want to have a different accuracy for it, you can type in your numbers here with one of those values having decimals. So 5.55, for instance, if I start off at 5.55, then I'm going to have 2 decimal places for my slider. So 0 is less than 5.55 is less than 10. Now my slider is 2 decimal places, so it's a lot smoother. So to complete this sphere now, I can plug that into the R. You see it got much bigger. So now if I slide back and forth, you see that it actually will get smaller and larger as I change it. Okay. questions do you have?
How did you get that dialog box to type in 1/5?
Double click in the workspace. Yeah, it's a search. Any other questions? Okay.
So I just type 1/5 and it'll come up with a slider?
That'll make a slider from 1 to 5. So basically, when you're typing it in, you have to tell it what your minimum value is, what your starting value is, and what your ending or maximum value is. So 1 is less than 5 is less than 10, or whatever you want to change it to. Yes?
To get the decimal, can you also put 0.00?
I think so. So 0.00 is less than 10 should also, yeah, produce 2 decimal points. Okay, so I'm going to stop this video, and then we're going to move on to establishing a second geometry and having it rotate around what we've now just created, which is the sun.